Hey, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name's Olivia, and I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher, and I'm also a singer and a singing teacher. And if you are a private singing teacher yourself, this video is for you. So I think that as singing teachers, we're seeing more and more gender diverse and gender nonconforming students show up in our studios. So this is an amazing thing. It's a wonderful thing to give someone an opportunity to express their voice in a safe setting with a private instructor. There are so many anti-trans bills and so much transphobia in our country that it's really important that as educators and as creative people that we really create spaces for gender nonconforming people. So as singers and students ourselves, I think that, the relationship between student and voice teacher is not always simply about technique. It's not always simply about singing the right notes and the right rhythms and the right vocal technique. It's also about a close relationship. So I think that we have a unique opportunity to create really safe spaces for gender nonconforming people. With the rise of the visibility of trans people, it's really important that we can approach this instruction with care, with respect, and with technical expertise. So in this video, I'm going to give you a little introduction to gender affirming voice training, what that looks like, and how you can create a really affirming space for your singing students. I'm going to share some of the basics of gender affirming voice training and give you the foundation to make sure that your vocal studio is really grounded in that respect and that care. So let's get started. So let's first talk about what gender affirming voice training even is. So as a gender affirming voice teacher, I work with students who are looking to align their voice with their identity. So an example would be a trans woman who was assigned male at birth and went through a testosterone puberty. She might want that alignment with her gender identity and her voice so that she's not misgendered on the phone when she calls somebody or when she goes to order a coffee, for instance. So I also work with trans men or trans masculine folks who are interested in a more masculine perceived voice, as well as maybe non-binary or gender non-conforming people who are interested in a more androgynous voice. So this training, when it comes to speech, centers around resonance, sort of where that placement is. It centers around pitch. It centers around intonation, how you're moving your pitch as you speak. And we can also look at aspects of articulation, of vocal weight, as well as breath control and projection and things like that. So trans feminine folks who are interested in a more feminine perceived voice, we might be working on a higher, brighter, maybe a lighter sounding voice versus trans masculine folks who might be looking for a heavier, weightier, lower kind of sound. And the key here is really working with each student's specific goals, because not everyone's going to have the same kind of voice that they're looking for that's really going to align with them. So it's really about connecting with that student and making sure that they are moving toward the voice that they are looking for. So if you're interested in learning more about this speech aspect, I have lots of other videos here on my channel, but you can also reach out to me as well if you're interested in learning more about how to teach these techniques. Now, when it comes to gender affirming singing training, we use some of the same techniques. So again, with trans feminine people, we might be looking toward maybe some range extension, so higher pitch range extension, bringing sounds forward in terms of resonance, lightening that vocal weight, and then also considering the vowel modification. So vowels that are darker, a little bit more like this, are going to be a little bit more masculine perceived. This is going to be a little bit more feminine perceived because of the placement of my vowel. So you might recognize this like in terms of genre, like an opera singer, oh, might be a little bit more back here, versus a musical theater person might be a little bit more up here. So we can kind of use that comparison. So there's lots of things that you already know and things that you already use in your studio that really apply to this gender affirming training. So again, here, the most important thing is that you're helping someone to express their true voice. So next year, I'm just going to talk about some of the key elements that I think are really important when you are working with gender nonconforming students. So first things first, affirmations. So affirming your student with their preferred name, with their pronouns, that really goes a long way with, making sure that your student feels comfortable and seen, especially in this day and age where, your student might be experiencing a lot of places where they can't be themselves in public or with family even, or at school if they're in school, or at work. So it's really important that you create a space where you really see them, who they are, so that you can start to build that trust with them, that they can open up and really work on their voice with you. So many students might be coming into this situation feeling dysphoric or feeling uncomfortable or disconnected from their voice. So it's important to be sensitive to that as well. Next, it's really important to understand the anatomy in terms of hormone replacement therapy. So some of your students might be going on hormone replacement therapy in order to feel more congruent with their gender. So for trans feminine people who might take estrogen, things like that, there is going to be no change in the voice. So those who have gone through a testosterone puberty, so trans women who were assigned male at birth, for instance, there is no hormone therapy that is going to change that vocal sound. So that's why we use these gender affirming vocal techniques and exercises, so that given the instrument that they have, they can still access a voice that really aligns with them. So for trans masculine folks who take exogenous testosterone, they will experience a change of the voice. So the vocal cords get longer and thicker when testosterone is introduced into the body, whether that's through a natural testosterone puberty or through an exogenous testosterone therapy. However, there are some differences between those two situations. So somebody who takes exogenous testosterone will not get the kind of growth in the larynx that somebody who goes through a natural testosterone puberty does. So that can result in a different sounding vocal quality or different kind of resonant sound than somebody assigned male at birth. So it's really important to know the difference. So if you have somebody in your studio who's going through the process of T to kind of make sure that you have educated yourself on what that process is like. And I have some other videos on that if you're interested in learning about that. And it's also important to know, what you can share with your student if they're thinking about taking T or what they can kind of expect through that journey. The next key point is that personalization is the key. So not every singing student who is trans feminine, let's say, is going to want a much higher voice, for instance. So really, I think it's important to make sure that you're treating your gender nonconforming students just the same as you would any student, that every person is going to be a little bit different and have their own needs, their own interests. But I think that with the voice, there's this extra layer of complication with those that are gender nonconforming. That there's there can be this layer of importance on the voice. So it's important to be sensitive to those things. So you might have students that are really, want a voice that really lives in the binary, that is really either feminine perceived or masculine perceived, maybe some other voices that want to have some androgynous qualities to it. So this idea of like a student-centered model for teaching is really important here, that you are not necessarily the expert on all things, that you are there to support the student in their own specific goals. Next is making sure that you are emphasizing the importance of vocal health. So especially if if you have students going through hormone therapy or not, it's really important, especially when you're making modifications to the voice, that you make sure that you're emphasizing this care, that you're making sure that your students stay hydrated, that they are doing gentle warm-ups every day, that they're staying consistent with these things. Another thing to think about is, sort of abuse of your voice. If they're in loud environments and really pushing their voice a lot, or really drying their voice out with alcohol use or whatever the case may be. It's really important to emphasize this care and this thought about the voice in the long term, and making sure that the modifications that you make together can be sustainable for the voice. And finally, it's really important to make sure that you create a lesson environment that's a safe space to allow your students to really explore. So whether that means, exploring different types of repertoire, maybe, different points of view, or higher or lower songs, or different genres, whatever the case may be, that exploration and kind of allowing your student to really find their voice within all different types of sounds that they can make can really make a big impact and offer this kind of window into their voice. So even if it feels a little awkward for them at first, really affirm them and make the environment playful, so that they don't feel alone in that process. You can really affirm and celebrate this path and understand that the voice is deeply tied to identity. No matter who you are, it's important to feel at home and like you are presenting yourself to the world as yourself with your voice. So if you're just starting to explore how to make your voice studio as welcoming as possible, I would just encourage you to continue learning. You can attend trainings and workshops and do some research. You could also make connections with speech pathologists who also do gender affirming voice work, similar to this speech work that I was talking about earlier. Building a community of other teachers and professionals is really invaluable, so that you can, ask questions and share resources and things like that. Ultimately, you are a voice teacher, and we are trained, it's in us, to take every student as they come. Creating a welcoming space is just really about fostering an inclusive and supportive environment where each student can feel empowered to find and express their authentic voice. If you have any thoughts, any questions or comments, if you have some things that have worked for you in the past or haven't worked for you, or things that have been really important to you throughout your teaching, I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. Thank you so much for checking this video out. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next video.